Hi, everyone. Welcome to Turning Point. I'm your host, Blaine, co-founder and CEO at Dryrun cash flow forecasting software. And joining me today is John Gillham. Now, John is the founder of Originality AI, where they have built the most accurate AI detector that checks your website content to see if it's been AI generated, as well as for plagiarism, facts, and readability. Thanks for joining me, John.
Yeah, thanks, Blaine. Thanks for having me.
So I always like to kick it off and find out, where did you first, or when, I guess, did you first become interested in being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, a little bit of the classic kid where sort of had the grass cutting route. Tried to sort of buy and sell different things over when I was sort of in my youth, and then where it sort of really took hold was as a mechanical engineer at school, and then worked as a co-op at a hard tech startup, or as an intern at a hard tech startup, and then that sort of I had to do a bunch of tasks that I always sort of assumed were sort of meant for more intelligent, experienced people to do, such as like building the website and trying to make some for initial sales. And that sort of really opened my eyes to what was possible. And I think that was one of the sort of initial sparks.
It's amazing how many entrepreneurs I talk with. It always, there's always a nugget there as a kid, and then it just starts to grow and build, and the next thing you know, you're kind of moving out on your own. And so when did you take that first leap? What was that, like after that, I guess that experience in that startup, what was your first sort of step out into the entrepreneurial world?
Yeah, so the first step was one of the tasks that I did was sort of assigned with no experience was we need a website. This is sort of 2008 timing, and so I had hired people at that time. It was called Odesk, but now it's called Upwork. But had hired people on that platform to build the site, and I thought this was incredible that you sort of had this really amazing arbitrage between sort of North American wages and overseas labor. And I started building some websites that sort of meshed with my desire and sort of love of spreadsheets. And so my first entrepreneurial journey was sort of around selling spreadsheets that did some specific sort of calculations, from finance calculations, on a WordPress site.
Okay. Oh, interesting. So this is 2008. So that's still like pretty early on in the world of the web. I remember it well. I had a creative agency at the time, and we were doing a lot of websites and had dove into like online training and the first sort of LMSs, learning management systems, and all that were out at the time. And so, so was it just like it was you when you were outsourcing overseas staff? How long did you sort of work on that business? Did you grow the business? Did you carry on for a while? What was kind of the deal there?
Yeah, so I went sort of graduated, went to work at a large oil and gas company, at the time, largest ExxonMobil, largest company in the world at the time, and worked in sort of the project management side of that business, and then sort of viewed the online entrepreneurial stuff as a little bit of a sort of like more healthy activity to be doing than playing a video game. And I sort of viewed it as the same, that I was kind of dabbling in it. And then that dabbling involved building a websites, testing out new strategies. And then when my wife got pregnant, we were going to have our first child. That was really sort of and I saw sort of the trajectory of the career and the number of hours that I would be working, and thought that, and where we would probably be living. And thought that was not the path that I wanted to pursue. And if there was an opportunity to get back to both my wife and my hometown, that was when I started taking it way more seriously. So kind of 4 years of just dabbling in it, and then I got significantly more serious after 4 years of kind of viewing it as a computer game as opposed to a business.
And so you were basically also setting up in those original days like a complete remote workforce, which fast forward a number of years is obviously the commonplace now. But what were some of the challenges of like getting started with this remote workforce when people weren't really doing it by and large at that time?
Yeah, so I think I'd say one of the Email was I mean, Slack became so incredibly useful. I don't know exactly the timing on around that, but trying to coordinate everything with email and Google Docs. I think just some of that, like that, the core tech wasn't quite there for it to be
Mhm.
working as well as it does now, where it's Slack and it's just totally seamless. Shared drives, sort of some combination of like Dropbox plus email, and just it just didn't quite work great. So that was, I would say, was one of the sort of from a remote work standpoint, what is different now than then. Significantly improved video calls, tools like Loom, and so really just a lot of the tooling that has come around to enable remote work and a pretty standardized practice around it and communication practices that results in people onboarding into a company and them being sort of seamlessly integrated into it, as opposed
Mhm.
to then it was like everyone had their own kind of system. And so anytime you brought somebody on board, you had to teach them your system. Now, here's how we use Dropbox.
Yeah. I do remember the Dropbox days, and well, honestly, we still use Google Drive a lot, and
Yep.
Slack and Zoom and like Loom and all the ones you're talking about, and it's made life a lot easier. But it's still, to some degree, in Notion, it's like disjointed parts everywhere to some degree. So how did like you're when you started to get serious about the business, what were some of the first steps you took, and what were some of the biggest challenges you had to move from, okay, now we're getting serious, now we're moving over here, and we're I'm digging in, I'm starting to hustle. What were some of the things you had to do?
Yeah, I think the majority of it, the shift was a mindset shift around not just doing things that were kind of scratching the sort of the curiosity itch, but that were sort of shifting my focus from like, activities that would benefit me from an enjoyment and it's curiosity itch scratching to sort of activities that were focused on the customer and focused on sort of adding value to the visitors to the site. And that meant sort of, to use sort of analogy of eating the vegetables, but that meant sort of significantly more sort of boring tasks that needed to be completed because something done was a lot better than something half done. But my sort of curiosity had been scratched, so I said put that on the side. And just sort of what I was focusing on is a real mindset shift from sort of serving myself, my own curiosities, and then moving on to serving the customer. So that was the biggest change.
So one of the challenges I know, getting started in a business like this is like, how did you find your customers? Like, how did you gain customers, and how did it sort of uh build? Like, how did it start to build and grow, and kind of get a regular engine
Yeah.
the right people coming in the door?
Yeah, so the business evolved from a sort of a building little sites to then building bigger websites. And the core strategy that has been used throughout and sort of that the although it has felt pretty disjointed and has looked certainly from the far pretty disjointed, there's been a common thread ever since, even going back to 2008, around content marketing and creating content, publishing it on the web, ranking in Google for that content, and that has been a pretty common thread that has continued throughout. And so what changed was um, or what sort of started that snowball building was focusing in on some of the sites and significantly improving the quality of the content that was being published. And this is back in like, again, 2012, 2013, and then building up extra capacity in my content team and then selling that extra capacity to others. And so sort of building in public and sharing what I was doing and how it was working, using it on my own sites, eating my own dog food, and then sharing what I was doing and then selling that extra capacity. That was sort of the snowball that started things really rolling.
And so that was still, like, I guess, still relatively early in the kind of content is king world, which has changed, morphed, and evolved in a million different ways that I know we're going to get into here in a little bit. Um, how did you sort of see that early world, that 2012, 13, 14, like 10 years ago, as you SEO was a thing, content was a thing, but it was still early for customers, and how did you kind of get them on board to something that was still really quite new at the time?
Yeah, so I think build the transparency around building in public, and sharing detailed case studies of sites that I was building, and like revealing the URL and sharing exactly the strategies that were being used. I think that built up a lot of trust with customers, and that was a big driver. And then I think the growth rate, I mean, it was a market that had significant tailwinds, where there was a lot of people coming on sort of continuing to see the ability of Google and search engines to drive a lot of customers to their business. And so I think that was the kind of, yeah, the transparency and the tailwinds within the industry.
So, there's been, I guess, in the kind of the content marketing world, the SEO world, I think probably some big sort of uh, pivot points, I suppose. Which I know AI, of course, recently that's a massive one. But what were some of the other ones before that? Because I know there's been some shifts over time that have over the last 10 years that have been fairly fundamental. How did this start to build?
Yeah, there's been sort of Panda, Penguin, so there's lots of major algorithm updates, and then the helpful content update, and then sort of a whole bunch of updates throughout that time. I'd say the way I think about it, is that sort of when I started out, um, Google was, I think, easier to game, in that 2010 timing. And I probably
Mhm.
thought, I don't know what the ratio was, but let's say I thought 90% about Google, 10% about the end customer. And I think the journey to now, and we use
Mhm.
content marketing extremely heavily on originality and drive lots and lots of traffic to and then where we get the majority of our customers from. Um, and now we think sort of 90% about the visitor to the site, and serving them with the piece of content that we're creating, and 10% about the algorithm and making sure we're going to rank well. And so I think that change from sort of 10% thinking about the person to 90% thinking about the person with each piece of content, has not been perfectly linear, but certainly directionally trend. And I think that is heavily driven off of some of the sort of fundamental pivots that Google has forced. And I think I know Google certainly has problems right now, but I think overall it's been a positive compared to the state of search, 15 years ago.
So let's start to dive into this a little bit because I know we're going to get into kind of what you're doing now and how that works. But when did the issues really start to appear? The initial issues of this overwhelming flood of AI written content.
Yeah. So helpful content update. So 2020 GPT-3 was released by OpenAI, and then there was a significant number of AI writing tools that got launched to significant success. Jasper AI is sort of the poster boy of that. Raised 156 million on at a 1.5 billion valuation after going from zero to something like 50 million in revenue in year one. That could be, I'm wrong, I think, on some of those numbers, but directionally accurate. Sort of businesses that exploded. That content was being published on the web. Google was facing this onslaught of AI generated content. In 2024, not all AI content is spam, but anybody that is producing spam on the web is using AI to do so. So all spam is AI generated right now. And Google is facing this existential threat where if their search results are filled with nothing but AI content, then why would anybody go to the search result? Why wouldn't they just go to the AI? But they also then have to be this AI forward company, so that they don't face their sort of Kodak moment where technology that they invented, totally disrupts them. And so it's a really
Mhm.
sort of tricky needle to thread for Google. And so kind of when did this problem start? Um, it's 2020 I'd say the sort of the point at which it started. 2022 is when it started to accelerate, and then launch of ChatGPT, GPT-4 in particular, it exploded. Um,
Mhm.
it became it almost impossible for a human to tell the difference between AI and human content. Um, the helpful content updates have been a lot about sort of looking to address mass publishing of content that is just built to rank and not for the user. Um, and they're doing a lot of things in search now that are sort of my take on it is outsourcing their ability to detect by pushing third-party moderated platforms like Reddit, which is massively increasing in visibility because there's sort of there's kind of the moderator component in there that are quite good at sniffing out um, yeah, not non-genuine content. So that's kind of I'd say the rough timeline. Start in 2020, accelerate in 2022, explode in 2023, and sort of really struggling right now to keep a lid on it.
Yeah, and this is an area that like I'm really curious about because one of the issues, like as a small business owner, a lot of others like me, um, where is this going to go, and how do we compete when we're doing like comparatively almost no content, like a little bit of content. We're taking our time. It's going out once a week, maybe. Um, but the part I kind of struggle with a little bit, like you said, is spam is all created by AI, but then AI is also used to generate content. And the point is to try and make it easier for people to generate something that's helpful and useful.
Yep.
This is colliding. So how do you sort of reconcile that? And where's the that moving target of where you can make content that's really helpful, but use tools that are supposed to help you to be able to do this, right?
Yeah. So I thinking beyond words. If all you have to contribute into the world right now is words, then you're in a tough spot because you have this sort of infinite source of pretty good, better than I can write words.
Yeah.
That is sort of able to create, yeah, an infinite number. And so if you're just sort of trying to win in that game of sort of getting exposure online in Google by publishing 500 words of clever thoughts, 750 words, 1,000 words, whatever it might be, you're gonna struggle. And so the sort of solution to that is to think beyond words. Is how can you help um, your audience, your potential customers, more than just words? And so is that a calculator that is specifically built for um, the search term that people are after? Is it a conversion table? Is it some other resource that um, helps with the searcher's journey? And if you can sort of, yeah, again, think beyond words, I think you have a much better chance of winning. And the AI tools can be great at helping you build those calculators or tables or whatever it might be, but you are using your expertise to ensure that the output is correct, as opposed to them just sort of going to the AI and hoping they got it right when it might not have. And so I think
Yeah.
that's what we're doing ourselves. Trying to sort of think beyond words when how we can add value to our users.
Yeah, yeah, and like like when we do content here, like it we, of course we use AI to help us with some of the, like I would say, the grunt work of stringing words together. Like a lot of times, like if I'm doing content, I don't think I'm William Shakespeare, right? Like so I'm not maybe the best writer, but I understand the point. I understand the structure. And it's like so I tend to go, okay, here's what I need to get across. Here's the important parts. Here's the stuff that matters. And I can build out this, like it's like a map. But then I don't sit there and put the ands and the thes and the there in there. Is that onside or is that offside today?
So I think Google is fate. So I think that's on site personally. That's like my view. I'm happy to read that content from you. I think the risk is um, society is wrestling with what is onside and offside.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to read a a AI generated baby formula review or a sort of specific product. That I think society is pretty clear. That's offside.
Yep.
Summary of the weather or sports, that's okay. or like
Mhm.
the distillation of news stories into a shorter version of it. Great use case. It gets murky in the middle, and
Mhm.
I'd say what you described is somewhere in between those extremes. And to me, great, happy to read it. I think the challenge that you're at risk of is that, um, like everything in sort of marketing, especially when you're working with an algorithm like Google, is that it's generally a sort of a risk discussion around the sort of probability of an incident occurring and the consequence of that incident occurring, that incident being getting penalized by Google. The use of AI
Mhm.
content increases my belief, and I think the data shows that the use of AI content increases your risk of getting on the wrong side of Google. Does the efficiency lift, the benefit sort of outweigh that risk? Possibly. I'm not arguing it doesn't in your case, but it does increase the risk, and so I think that's
Mhm.
the challenge that people have to think through and sort of hopefully be making that conscious decision the way that you are to say, okay, I can get more content out. I can focus on the things that matter more, and I'm okay with the risk increase as opposed to spending a day sort of tapping away on my keyboard. And I'm happy with the
Yeah.
quality of this content. So I think it's you're publishing AI content in 2024 is riskier than not publishing it, but it's really hard to say, that is wrong, that is like what's wrong, what's okay.
Yeah, and I know like that's because honestly, like it's shifted. When we first started playing around ChatGPT, which was ChatGPT 3, and we laughed at some of it, and we were sparing and everything, and now there's times where, like I said, like I'll do an outline, I'll do all the bullet points, I'm like, this is what I want to get across, and then I'll go through and like to edit and whatever, and there's times, a lot of times, where I'm like, "Gee, that explained it better than I could." Like
No.
that worded it better than I could, and so there's, to me, I'm like, that is more value to the user because it actually gets the point across better than my ham-handed ideas at times, right?
Yeah.
Like the ideas there, but they add a level of clarity at times. There's also things that are just like, you shake your head, you rewrite, right? So
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a way better writer than I am. I'd rather communicate in spreadsheet format, I think, most of the time, and it's yeah, it's really incredible, what it can do. But I think, yeah, one of the other clear concerns that people should be aware of is the mass publishing of it. So it's like
mhm.
mass publishing AI, Google will find you and punish you. So I think that, just so that I'm providing a clear answer, is if you're mass publishing AI, you're gonna get in trouble with Google.
Yeah, I don't think we have that worry. We're not probably publishing enough, to be honest, if you asked us. But and partly like we've started to do more video content. We've ramped up doing our podcasts that were a little bit more of just kind of nice and steady. We've actually ramped that level up, and a big part of it is, I don't even know if Google rewards us. I believe people will reward us because they can tell we're real and we
Yeah,
we speak about real things, and um, but then we're at the mercy of the algorithm in YouTube, and I don't know if we have not figured that one out either. Right? We just kind of try and make good content and hope that we get rewarded.
yeah,
Um, where is this? See, like, and I'll tell you, like I think we put up some pretty useful content, but like you said, we'll never keep up. Like this mass publishing, this massive amount of content out there, um, small businesses like ours, it feels like, oh, we're already drowning in content. What do we do? What can we do to improve our chances of our clients finding us? Right.
yeah. So I think, especially in your, like, so specifically in your case, I would look at what are um, what are some of the activities that people are signing up to your tool to do, and can that be turned into a on the web free calculator? No email opt-in, just sort of like when people need to search a keyword that you guys are sort of trying to rank for around, cash flow versus revenue, and it's a simple calculator that shows like example numbers, and then it identifies here's the revenue, and here's your cash flow, and here's why they're different. And if you're trying to figure out what yours is, enter your revenue, enter your expenses, and we can, I mean, I'm simplifying it, but and we can tell you your cash flow. So I think
Yeah.
creating some of those sort of like what people are looking for in your core tool, give them a light version of that for free. And I think that is a way to go, again, sort of beyond words, to add value in a way that enriches the user.
Okay. Yeah. I think we're going to have to put on our thinking cap and figure out what we could offer a value like that. The challenge that we have is that we sell mostly to CFOs.
Yep.
Um,
That calculator is not going to be that useful for them.
calculator, they're not going to care. I can't teach a
Right.
CFO how to be a good CFO, right? But there's
Right.
there's value we can bring, insights we can bring. But I'm going to have to really think on that, because it is a challenge, but it's also a challenge for them to wade through, and find things too, right? So
Yeah, because exactly. So I'd say potentially looking at resource posts. So where they might have to look at um, uh, like price, like a CFO might need to worry about like price nationalizing between Canada and the US. I'm not sure I forget what that name is on but when you're like importing a product, how do you properly price it
mm,
within your own company? And there's sort
yeah.
of like a table to look at for that. And so
Mm,
sometimes like the sort of creation of those tables, or looking at the tax rate by country by year and graphing that. I mean, that's probably already been done, but I think doing some of those research posts that would answer a specific question around like what has been the corporate tax rate in Ireland for the last 20 years. And a CFO might care about that when they're thinking about where to open an office. That cool,
hmm
there's this really low tax rate right now, but what has been the historical trend? And so I think those kind of resource posts, more than tool posts, might be helpful to CFOs when CFOs don't need the
Yeah.
formulas, because they're going to be able to do that themselves, but they might need the inputs.
Okay, that's really interesting. Yeah, because it's uh, that feels like a light, like where you can go. Okay, I think we can go down there and start to see like what are those things of value that we could offer. That it's not just a written post, but there's some meat to it. That's really interesting. So I want to dive in now. Like, so let's dive in a little bit into originality and when did you first see like, here's the problem, here's the opportunity, and what was that first sort of nugget where it's like, I think we actually going to build a business around this.
Yeah, so since the sort of like going way back 2008, there's been sort of this common theme around creating content that gets traffic from Google, building up extra capacity, selling it. Had a content marketing agency as a result of that. Sold that content marketing agency in 2022, um, and had seen this wave of generative AI coming by tools like Jasper, where we were one of the heaviest users at one point of Jasper, um, because we had this transparent AI product where we said we're writing with AI, but we're letting you know that we're doing that. And then we were struggling to answer if we're selling a piece of content for $100, $1,000, whatever the rate might have been, and the client says, "How do you know your writer didn't just use AI?" It's like, well, we have a policy, we have a plagiarism check, we have a SEO check to make sure it's going to, likely rank well in Google, but we didn't really have a great control in place around AI detection. And so that was the starting point where we wanted to build a plagiarism tool that worked better for large content publishers. Existing plagiarism tools were not built for larger volume content publishers, and so that we wanted to build an improved plagiarism checker, and then also wanted to build an AI checker to try and sort of redefine what original content in 2022 when we started building, what that really looked like.
Mhm. So what, like, so today, how could uh, first of all, I guess who are your customers? Are they small business? Are they mid-sized enterprise, or all three?
All three. We say don't we don't want to be used by academia. The use case in academia is a little bit trickier in terms of like there is AI detection is highly accurate but not perfect. Does
Mm-hmm.
create false positives. Does get things wrong. The threshold in academia needs to be much higher. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so we any our users are anybody that is acting as a copy editor. So that is anybody that is trying to publish content on the web, gets content from a writer, needs to review that content, and then get that content published. Where that sort of final QA QC step in that content creation process. So small businesses, not usually solo operators where they're writing their content themselves, but if they are outsourcing that content to somebody and they're acting as a copy editor, and then all the way up to some of the largest websites in the world are using us.
And so the I guess like what is the end goal? Like what if you find that there's copy here it says okay it's 5% AI, 10%, 100% AI. Like how is this best sort of I'm just curious how your customers are using it, and is it like a kind of an all or none, or is there kind of like, oh, that's fine, this part's good, like we were saying, like where's that line uh go today?
Yes, it depends on the customer. Some customers are sort of a no AI ever period, um, heavy-handed approach, and some customers take a little bit of a lighter touch approach where we say, well, if a writer gets sort of 30% AI or 30% probability of AI, and then occasionally they'll have an article that will show up as that the tool thinks it was AI generated, but out of every 10, that's only happening once. Um, and they can be pretty confident that there's a human in the loop. I think that in some customers are happy with that. So it's really kind of customer dependent based on that risk profile that I talked about. Where are they saying no AI period? Are they saying as long as there's a human in the loop, we're wanting to make sure it's not just like copied and pasted out of ChatGPT because that's super high risk for us, and we should be paying the writer, $100 to copy and paste something out of ChatGPT. Um, and so that's is really up to the customer to sort of use it the way that they see fit within their controls. We have some that go no AI ever, period, and others that are far more flexible.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the challenges that like I see even in our circumstance, like because we are um, uh, writing content um, that's targeting, like I said, CFOs and tech consultants and things like that. We in the past when we were at that point we were targeting a little bit lower end of the market, and we did have some content writers we had hired here and there. The challenge we had is I think that the way they wrote it probably sounded more human. What they wrote was often clueless, and there's we had to stop. We're like, that's it's
Right.
not, we can't use it. Like we probably have a folder here with 200 articles that never saw the light of day, and then there's a bunch that we literally rewrote from scratch.
Right.
And what we're finding now is, like I said, I can build out, this is the stuff that we need. And it's like AI kind of understands it because it's finance, and it knows more about
Right.
finance than if I try and hire a writer that doesn't know anything about finance. It's like I'm working with someone that kind of knows finance, and here's the angle we want to take,
Yep.
and the quality of our content and the what we get to offer actually has more use than when I hired people, because I couldn't go and afford to say I want to find the CEO that actually is also good at writing and can
Right.
write an article for us, right? So there's the challenge too, is that for us, I know I wouldn't just be able to put a sweeping. I just need a person to write it.
Right.
Um, how do you reconcile that? And I know like AI is getting better and better at stuff too, right? So what do you see in the future for this?
Yeah. So I think looking I think you're exactly right. If your website is about taking care of cooking, you can probably find someone that's a good cook and a writer, and their rate be reasonable. If you're writing for CFOs, hard to find a CFO that's wants to be a writer and is a rate that is reasonable. And so it makes thought leadership pieces need to really come from the founding team and not be really challenging to come from outside writers that you hire.
Mhm.
Where you can sort of flip that is potentially there's studies that you could commission from those outside people around like uh, CFO salaries, might be interesting, or CFO, or um, popularity of businesses started up by state. And so if you saw which states had the most businesses by percent of businesses being started by year, and that's sort of like trending
Yeah.
over time, that might be a pretty interesting data point to CFOs, and could be created by a writer that wasn't a CFO, but was just sort of knew how to access that data and share it, or like corporate taxes paid over time. So I think there's a bunch of I think given the customer that you're trying to write for, the type of content that you would be able to kind of create that would rank and get traffic, you'd be very hard pressed to find a writer that isn't yourself to produce it. And so it makes sense that you've landed where you have. But then the question of kind of how do you scale that, and how do you sort of grow the content side is maybe not tools like we talked about, but
Yeah.
like the studies and resource posts, I think would be a really useful type of content for your ideal customer.
And that's obviously like quality over quantity. Like it's all about quality and delivering something useful. Do you foresee a day where the it's less about whether it's written by AI and more about is it accurate? Like, because AI is going to get better and better at writing and impersonating people, and at some point, it's probably going to be harder and harder to tell, was it a person, was it a robot, how much was which is which. But the most important thing is uh, it's like the value check. Like you said, is it really valuable
Right.
for people over how is it generated, right?
Yeah. So I don't know is the answer. But if that were to be the case, I believe Google's reason for existing would mostly stop. And so I think if we were ever at the state where the reader did not care if a piece of content was generated by a human or AI, as long as it was good, then I don't think Google exists, because why would you go to Google and flip through a bunch of ads and sponsored links versus going to your sort of personal assistant AI that would provide that answer and know way more context about you. And so I think in that world, Google doesn't exist, certainly in its current form. And then sort of some pretty interesting questions come up about like, well, what incentive exists for people to create good content out into the world. So some really interesting questions come out of that. I think though that leap is a little bit too far for me to imagine, but I know I could be wrong. So I don't know. I'd say there's in my lifetime, I think I'd say it's probably a 75% chance that some version of the current web and current Google will continue to exist.
Mm-hmm.
25% chance that will, yeah, that I'm wrong, and it won't.
Well, I think for me, like the way I see it is if um, I want Google to be the one. Now, maybe Google, I'm not sure, but do I want to trust, or do I trust AI to tell me if something's like Google would
Mm.
probably use it too? Really, again, it's like how do you judge whether something is actually has value? And that's really what I want shared with me is like what tell me which ones of these actually have value. I don't really care necessarily. Like if I'm looking for information, I don't care that much how much of it may have been built by or written by this person or that person or outsourced to a writer, or is it hitting the nail on the head? I'm going to give you an example here that is really starts to drive me nuts now. If you ever go to buy like anything, the first thing you do is you go online and you see like, okay, I want reviews. I need a new lawnmower. I want to see what reviews are out there and what do I trust. And 90% of it is um, basically just a way to link me to Amazon to get my dollars when I click on something. And there's no value to it. And I can tell
Yeah.
there's no value to it.
Yeah.
Can Google tell there's no value to it? Um, even the old tried and true consumer reports. Well, there's links. They're trying to get me to click on stuff.
Yeah.
So where do I tend to go? Well, I tend to go to YouTube, where I find somebody that I'm like, well, this is a person and their reputation and their channel depends on their reputation. So there's at least a higher level of trust, not 100% level of trust. But to me, there's a place there where, like you said, Google's starting to use Reddit, and maybe they'll start using more YouTube. But there's factors I can see in these so-called review sites that are obvious garbage that I don't even think should be barely showing up on Google.
Yeah.
It seems to me like there's space for it to be able to look at the quality of the content, right? Or is that, you know,
I,
I,
I I
you know,
I fully agree with you, and I think those are the same places that I go when I look at things. How I think it's an interesting video kind of went semi viral talking about like was that in Google's interest to make their search results better or just make their ads better? And if they just can make their ads better, then the only way to get visibility, they've already sort of got the majority of the market of dominant position, a monopoly position according to the government. Um,
mhm,
do they extract value by making their search results worse and improving their ad experience? And that's where they and or their own properties, aka YouTube,
yeah.
and that's where they sort of keep people and as a result extract dollars by advertising. So I'd say I think that's that version that I just described as an interesting theory. I think probably in the end they know that their search results have to be continue to be the best because there are others that are coming to try and take it, take
Yep.
their lunch. OpenAI is coming, Perplexity is coming, and so I think Google needs to continue to try and they try and present the best, but the amount of sort of just the amount of content that is being published makes that a really, really challenging job for them. Something 97% of the web gets zero visibility by Google. So even the crappy search results you're seeing, that is the top 3% according to Google. The Google's already identified 97% plus of the web that is not going to be shown in its search results.
And so do you see people starting to like move into, I'm just going to ask chat. I'm just going to ask this. I'm going to use a different engine. And I guess the worry from my point of view is, let's say people just lose, and it can happen quick, you know, ask MySpace. Like, people can change, they can change directions pretty quick.
Yeah.
If they start to trust chat or some other platform like that, um, and so then for businesses, kind of the world changes overnight. And like, let's say for us, if someone asks chat, what's the best, cash flow forecasting software for a mid-sized business or whatever, is it only going to give one answer? And will that answer be, well, basically it's based on the people that have probably spent the most money to date or that's been around the longest or whatever, right? Doesn't necessarily mean it's the best answer. That's what kind of, worries us a little bit too, is if this changes really rapidly, does it become a single answer? It might feel simple to the user, but do they actually see options, right?
Yeah, I agreed. It, and I don't know the answer other than I think the answer is probably somewhat similar to trying to optimize for search right now in terms of how do you optimize for um, I think brand in terms of like how is your company perceived in the minds of the audience or that classical definition of a brand. I think that optimizing for AI is very similar to branding into an audience where if you want to be um, the for us the most accurate AI detector, which we provably are by studies, but then we also want the that brand to be associated with us. And so we try and communicate that as often as possible. And the more often we do that, the more it gets included into the training data sets, the more other people communicate it, the more it's in the data sets, and then the more that will show up as what's the most accurate AI detector, and we will be one of the ones mentioned, because one, we have the data to back it up, and two, that has been our brand that we've put out into the world, and hopefully sort of how we are perceived in the minds, the mind being OpenAI, whatever LLM is answering the question.
So, like, and obviously, you guys are right on the bleeding edge of this. Like, you're on the forefront of this. How do you see this evolving over the next, like, just because it's moving so fast? How do you see this evolving over the next 3 years, and how do you see your your business and your service offering evolving to respond?
Yeah, so if you asked me this 2 years ago, sort of we launched the weekend before ChatGPT launched, so kind of one year and 11 months ago, I would have said, we're in infant mortality stage. GPT-4 could come out and make detection totally impossible. What we have seen is that there's been a plateauing of LLMs in terms of their writing capability. All sort of existing data sets have been used in the training. They're all using the same hardware. They're all using the same sort of foundational technology in the form of transformers for the training. And so we're seeing this sort of plateauing of large language models, the open source models kind of catching up to the closed source models quickly. And so where do I see it playing out over the next few years? Probably not a very common or popular version, but I think the existing core technology is not going to significantly improve, but the sort of peripheral technology around it, the way it gets used, is going to just go everywhere. I think you're obviously a spreadsheet guy, considering your product, and I think the spreadsheet technology has been around and mostly unchanged. Some fanciness added into it, but the sort of proliferation of it into all facets of business was massive. And I think that would probably be the analogous path that I would see of how sort of this technology will impact businesses. It would be a very similar path to sort of the arc that spreadsheets took, where it's still a table entering some formulas,
Yep.
but that sort of simple concept. I can't imagine how many businesses would need to basically shut down operations if Excel or Google Sheet shut down totally. No one could use it for a day. I think a large percentage of people would not be able to function, and I think that's what we're going to see, with sort of large language model technology integrating into everyday work.
Yeah. Oh, it's fascinating. It'll be interesting to see where it goes. And of course, even with us, we're on our toes all the time, looking at, it's interesting because we're looking at where there's potential threats that we have to stay on top of and make sure we're prepared. And then we're also excited by looking at what opportunity does it offer in areas to help our customer. And so, it's a very different sort of equation that we're looking at, right?
Yeah.
So, John, how do people get hold of you? And like you already mentioned, it's kind of who you help, but maybe just reiterate, like, who should be talking with you and how do they find you?
Yeah, so find us at originality.ai, and anybody that has content marketing as part of their marketing efforts, they want to know that the quality of the content that they are publishing isn't increasing their risk and is increasing the chances that they're going to have success with their marketing efforts. Originality.ai is a suite of tools to help people with that: AI detection, plagiarism checking, fact checking, grammar and spell checking, and readability checking. And we've got some other stuff in the works, but basically as a final QA/QC step for any piece of content that you're about to publish.
That's terrific, John. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed the conversation, learned a lot. As you can see, I was starting to pick your brain on all kinds of stuff I was interested in, but I'm sure that people listening have the exact same questions. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And I also want to mention, if you are, especially if you are a CFO, you're leading a finance team, or you're a fractional CFO helping your clients work through the challenges today, and you're struggling with spreadsheets to do your cash flow, we can help you with a lot of that. We can save you hours every week and help you work as a larger team much more effectively, and come up with a story that the management team understands at the end of it all. So you can find us at dryrun.com. Thank you so much.